What's up, guys? This is Marco, and I'm here to do my predictions for the 2020-2021 Premier League. So I'm just going to be going through 1st to 20th, and hope you stick around. In first place, I've got Liverpool. I feel like winning the league last year finally broke the curse for Liverpool, and now they can walk around knowing that winning the league is possible and carry themselves like champions. And I think this can turn to them repeating. While his team hasn't done much, I feel like Thiago coming in really helps them, as now they have a world-class creative player at the center midfield position. And also, he had an underrated defensive presence at Bayern that shouldn't be ignored, and I think he's an upgrade on Ronaldo. This transfer also helps them avoid squad complacency, which I've seen brought up as an issue for this team, but honestly, I feel like with Klopp there, that won't be a problem to begin with. Then looking through the rest of this Liverpool team, there are world-class players everywhere. Alisson is an amazing goalie. Van Dijk's probably the best center back in the world. Trent Alexander-Arnold is David Beckham reincarnated as a right back. Andrew Robertson's one of the best left backs in the world. Just amazing going forward and defensively. Fabinho is world-class at his position. Now Thiago. Salah and Mane are two of the best wings in the world. And Firmino, I'd argue, is world-class at his role. And then you've got Joe Gomez, who could take a big step forward this year. And then the last player in the starting 11 is Henderson. He's not exactly a weak link. There's a potential issue for this Liverpool team in depth, but I feel like Keita could develop, and this could be his year to really take a step forward. And also, Oxlade-Chamberlain's coming back. Milner's still playing at a high level. And then there are younger players like maybe a Juric or a Brewster will get a chance. Nico Williams has looked legit as a player. And then Minamino, Shaqiri, Origi. They've got good enough players, I think, to repeat. And this Liverpool team, I've described them as a machine. I think they'll keep rolling on and get the Premier League title. In second place this year, I have Chelsea. Chelsea's the team that improved the most this summer by far. This team's looking extremely strong with a new attack, a reinforced defense, and likely some new tactics. The signings of Werner, Havertz, and Ziyech all add to this attack. Ziyech and Havertz bring a creativity that Chelsea just didn't have last year. And Werner is their first real big goal threat that they've had since Diego Costa. Adding them in a promising attack is Pulisic, who should be the fourth starter along with the three new signings. Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, and Giroud are also there, and I think this is the second most dangerous attack in the league right now. The defense have also improved massively with Thiago Silva and Ben Chilwell coming in, and turned a pretty suspect defense to one of the best in the league. Zuma should improve a lot next to Silva instead of having to play with Christensen or Rudiger. And I kind of want to see how Reece James can do. Will he be able to take over the spot from Azpilicueta? Could be an interesting battle to watch. And then also, for the defense, Conte is still going to be in front of him, making the job much easier. And Kovacic has been good in the past, too. So tactically, this Chelsea team should shift to a 4-2-3-1 with the main goal of counterattacking. So I feel like this will help them get a lot more points against the top 6 this year. They only got 13 out of 30 last year. And I feel like they'll be able to do much better against teams like Arsenal and Man City this year. This could make things tougher against more defensive teams like a Sheffield United or Burnley, but the creativity that they brought in should be enough to get them some goals. But there's a chance that they could end up like United last year, where they have several games where they just can't score. Also, their new signings need to adjust to the Premier League ASAP, but I feel like Chelsea have done that well in the past, and they'll be able to again. And then there is a situation with their goalie, with Kepa and Caballero both not being top 4 material, but I feel like despite the goalie situation, they're still good enough to play. This team is definitely heading in the right direction, and we'll see if Lampard can lead this team to success as a manager, just like he did as a player. I believe that he can do this, and a second place finish for Chelsea will give them confidence. In third place, I have Manchester City. Manchester City is one of the most talented teams in the world on paper, and they should challenge for every title they play for. The way the team's composed leaves them underachieving in many competitions. Like Liverpool and Man City have world-class players in so many positions, like Ederson, Laporte, De Bruyne especially, Sterling and Aguero, and I'd argue João Cancelo and Bernardo Silva are there as well. But despite all this, they struggle for a lot of reasons. Despite all the talent they have, their lineup really leaves them struggling. Things like João Cancelo playing an inverted wingback and not being able to perform at his highest level, Bernardo Silva being benched far too often, and just in general, the wrong players being selected, namely Gundogan and Gabriel Jesus being preferred to David and Bernardo Silva and Aguero a lot of the times. Also, this team flaws has not been solved. Zinchenko is not a long-term solution at fullback, and Fernandinho is 35, and Rodri has not looked like a good successor. Ake could perform well, but he's coming in from a team that was relegated, and he shouldn't be expected to fix this defense that's just been really bad lately. Pep is obviously an amazing manager, but his choices don't make sense to me a lot of the times. Despite all this, though, their flaws won't stop them from competing for a title. They're full of world-class players, and for a negative, I said they're playing Gabriel Jesus. That would be a positive on almost any team in the league. But despite all that, it does hold them back from reaching their full potential. Could they win a title this year? Yes. Say if Mendy stays healthy, Ake proves to be worth every penny, and Foden takes a huge step forward and fills David Silva's role, and the world-class players keep performing. If all that goes forward, I can see them winning the title, but there are a lot of what-ifs in that, and their flaws haven't been solved, and because of that, the highest I can put them is third. And fourth, I've got Manchester United. Right now, we're out of the teams that are really title contenders, and on to teams whose goal is to reach the top four. And Manchester United is the team with the best shot of reaching that goal. This team does have a lot of flaws, but there are a lot of positives, too. First of the positives, there's the creativity of this team. Bruno, Pogba, and Van de Beek are all great midfielders, all of them have the ability to create goals out of nowhere, and some of the best in the world at their positions. Also, the athleticism of this team is insane. Rashford, Martial, David James, Pogba, Wan-Bissaka, for example, they're all great athletes going forward, and the speed and strength that these players show can beat almost any team in the league. And combining that with the creativity, they've got such an amazing counterattack. However, there are a lot of flaws in this team. One possession this team really shows them. Rashford and Martial aren't number 9s that can be relied on to be poachers, and as I said in the Chelsea segment, this has led to some problems with them. And also, their defense isn't the best. Maguire, Lindelof, Shaw, Wan-Bissaka, they're all flawed. And then, in addition, I've noticed that this team is especially bad against the press. Pogba and Wan-Bissaka especially can be dispossessed a lot. And then there is the question of how the goalie situation will go. With De Gea there and Henderson coming back, maybe the competition will push De Gea back to his peak, or maybe Henderson can take that position. Then there is the problem of defensive midfield. Matic isn't at his peak in front of the defense anymore. In fact, it's really not clear who will play defensive midfield. I mean, I don't think Solskjaer wants to bench Bruno, Pogba, or Van de Beek, but none of them are true defensive midfielders. So unless they play in the diamond midfield, which they really shouldn't do, their fullbacks limits offensively, one of them will have to sit or play out of position. And this isn't a problem that can be solved by signing Sancho, and I really can't see them finishing above Chelsea, Liverpool, or Man City. So, despite all their flaws, this is a really good team with some really positive things, great qualities to build off of, and I think they'll be able to make the Champions League again. In 5th place in qualifying for the Europa League, I have Tottenham. Now, Tottenham are a tough team to predict, mainly to how varied their team is in quality. They've got a great attack with Harry Kane and Son, but a midfield that really isn't up to the standard of the rest of the top 6, and honestly the top 10. I mean, between Dele Alli, Harry Winks, Lo Celso, new signing Højbjerg, Sissoko, and whatever's going on with No Dembele, there really aren't great players in there with a possible exception of Lo Celso. Also, their defense isn't spectacular. They went from having the top fullbacks in the league with Walker and Rose to now it's not even really a strength with Ben Davies and Matt Doherty, who was great for Wolves in a 5-man defense, but that adjustment to a 4-man defense isn't easy. I mean, just ask Chelsea fans about Marcus Alonso. Now, Toby Alderweireld is solid in defense, but Davinson Sanchez and Eric Dyer aren't exactly great partners. Though they do have Lloris behind them, and Jose's managing them, and he won the title with Gary Cahill and like a 37-year-old John Terry, so I think he can set them up to do well. And also, another positive is, even though I did say he isn't great anymore, this could be the year Dele Alli gets back to his old form, and Harry Kane will probably be the top scorer in the league. Now, there is plenty of quality in the team, but I think their flaws hold them back from reaching. In 6th, I've got Leicester. And I know how it's a bit of a joke how saying keeping a player is like a new signing, but honestly, keeping James Maddison and Ndidi were like a signing for Leicester. Even those players show that they've got some real ambition and will keep challenging for Europe. Leicester's got a top 4 midfield in the league, I believe, with Maddison, Tielemans, and Ndidi. And that really, them alone pushes them into contention for Europe. Now, Jamie Vardy will probably fall off a little bit. I'd say his goals could drop into the mid-teens, but the rest of the attack should be able to step up. Harvey Barnes, Jose Perez, Iheanacho, and I've been really impressed with Damari Gray lately. They can take a step forward and provide some goals that Vardy will probably take a step back on. I think the big question in this team is defensively. Despite having Ndidi in front of them, Evans and Castagne are the big questions. Evans has not been amazing, and we don't know how Castagne will be set up in this team. He had been playing pretty well as a wingback in the 5th-back at Atalanta and Belgium, but we're not sure how he'll do here. And also, Ricardo Pereira's out until October, and James Justin isn't exactly lighting the world on fire as a backup. Now, Soyuncu is really good, and he could take a step forward to be considered like an elite defender, and I'm still high on Kasper Schmeichel behind them. I think the biggest question on this team as well is Brendan Rodgers. His teams have been unable to maintain success in the past, and I think he deserves to be questioned. It's also unclear how he's going to line up Leicester. They were doing a 5 at the back at the end of the year, and Castagne's signing could suggest they'll stick with it, but if they do that, then they'll need to play with 3 center backs, and I think they've only got 2 ones who can really start, unless Benkovic can really step up, because I don't think Wes Morgan's the starter in the Premier League anymore. Overall, this Leicester team has some great talent, but some big flaws and questionable leadership that hold them back from reaching the top 4. In 7th place, I've got Wolves. Now, they're one of the fastest rising teams in the world we've seen lately, and I think they'll be able to make it back to Europe this year. The positives in this team are easy to see. They've got a solid defense, a great midfield, a top striker, and possibly the best athlete in the league. For their defense, Connor Cody has shown an amazing passing ability, solid defense, and he just got called up to England. Now, and beside him, Bowley and Seiss have been solid as well. At wingback, Johnny's been a very good fullback, and now with Marcel signing there to provide depth, I'm very confident in that position, and Rui Patricio has been one of the top keepers in the league. Then you go to the midfield, and it's one of the best midfields in the league. Neves and Moutinho have amazing creativity and defensive abilities as well. And then you add the Dondecker into the mix with defense and midfield, and it's just got even more promise. Now, one of the biggest things for this team is Adama Traore, and he's a strange player to predict. This offseason was small, so I don't think you could expect a huge jump in quality for him, but getting that call up to Spain may do a wonder for his confidence, and he could start off really hot. Now, I do have to question his position. He did play wingback for some stretches last year, and Wolves haven't signed a Doherty replacement yet. This would allow Wolves to play both Jota and Pondits in front of him, but would you really want to waste your best player at wingback? It's a tough question that Wolves have to solve, and maybe sign a wingback. Up front, you've got, as I mentioned, Jota and Pondits who are good, and Jimenez, who's been great and should keep scoring. Now, their huge signings of Fabio Silva and Victor Ferreira probably won't have a huge impact on this year. They're both really young, but they will be good for them eventually. Now, basically everything I said about this team is positive, so you may wonder why they're only in 7th. Well, basically, their positives aren't as strong as the other teams. I mean, Jimenez is a really good striker, but he's not Harry Kane, he's not Aubameyang. The midfield is strong, but is it as good as United's or Chelsea or City's? Probably not. And again, the defense, it's solid, but not spectacular. Wolves got a complete team that'll get better as they build it up, but right now they've got a ceiling that they can't get above, and that ceiling's the top 4. In 8th place, I have Arsenal, and I feel like this is a very important season for Arsenal. They've been falling further and further away from the top 6. I really don't think they've done enough to stop this slide. The cup runs in Aubameyang have covered that to an extent, but they've had a really big drop in quality, and when compared to the rest of the top 6, they really aren't there, and I could honestly see Leicester and Wolves passing them, maybe even some teams like Everton or Sheffield. Now, when you look at this team, there are some clear positives, though. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is one of the best strikers in the league, if not the best, and in 9th place, I have Everton. I think Everton are just behind Chelsea for the best summer of this year, and they should aim to get back to Europe. Bringing in James Rodriguez, Allen, and Decore really elevates this team. And in addition, Jonjo Kenny will return from his loan and probably go right into the starting lineup. And Ancelotti has done great with this team and how it's set up. They have improved a lot since he got there. And going through this team, it's easy to see how people are excited about getting to Europe. I mean, the attack of Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, that's very exciting. And their midfield of James Rodriguez, Allen, Andre Gomes, and Decore, and add Sigurdsson and Davies into that mix, that's a midfield that can get into Europe. Now, their defense isn't the greatest. I'd say Lucas Digne is the only player who's really at that level. Jonjo Kenny, Mina, Holgate, Michael Keane, and Seamus Coleman, I don't think they're top 7 material right now. But a lot of them are young, could take a step forward. In goal, Pickford's still England's number one. I mean, I think people know he's not world class, but he's England's goalie. That means something. And another thing to be concerned about is their midfield does leave a lot to be desired defensively, and there are questions of how the new signings will do. I mean, James Rodriguez hasn't been a starter for around 5 years. Allen may struggle with adapting to the Premier League and dealing with a drop in quality of the players around him, and Takore is just coming off relegation. And if their signings don't do well, in reality this is a team that just finished 12th, and Carlo Ancelotti may not have the patience if he's offered a bigger job. On the positive side, though, this Everton team is very young, and you have many players like Moise Kean, Tom Davies, Calvert-Lewin, John Joe Kenny, Iwobi maybe, and Holgate who could take a step forward this year. Now, I'm not sure if that'll happen, but it could easily. Overall, Everton's a team with a good manager and some talent. They have an outside shot of getting to Europe, but I think their weaknesses and bigger teams who can match their talent will get the better of them, and they won't be able to reach Europe. In 10th place, I've got Sheffield United. Sheffield United is another team that's been rising really quickly, and I think they've got a small chance to reach Europe this year. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about second season syndrome, but I think that's mostly teams that do well because of a fluke. So, you can look at a team like Burnley, who I think they just had some really good form going, and I think you can see that as when they sold Michael Keane, he went to Everton and didn't do too well. But if you look at Sheffield United, their sales have been really good in the past. Harry Maguire, he ended up making England. Calvert-Lewin's been really good for Everton. Ramsdale, they were able to bring back after he did well for Bournemouth. And I think that this team is actually as good as we say it is. They aren't just all system players. Now, despite that, I still think Chris Wilder's a great manager, and he's taken Sheffield really far, and he'll continue to do so. And I think they're much better than the other defensive teams of the league, and I think they'll have another strong season. Recruitment's been solid. As I said, Ramsdale's been brought in. He is a downgrade compared to Henderson, but honestly not by that much. Bogle and Lowe come in. They provide some wing-back depth that they really needed. And I'm a big fan of Oliver Burke. I know that's not really analysis, but I think he'll do well in the system. I'd like him. Then also they brought in Ampadu from Chelsea. He's a good signing, and he may not start, but at the very least he'll take some playing time away from Phil Jagielka, which I think is good. Now go through the rest of the team. There's some clear strengths and weaknesses. So strengths is the defense, who were 4th in the league in goals allowed. That's really good. Despite losing Henderson, I don't think it's going to get much worse. Egan, O'Connell, Basham, they've all been solid, and if Ampadu can take a step forward, that'll be huge for them. In wingback, Baldock and Stevens have been very good as well, and now they have some depth behind them. Midfield, I think, is another strength, actually. Sander Berge is a top center mid in the league, and I really think Sheffield United should try to build around him. Then Norwood, Fleck, and Lundstrom, they're definitely great in system, and I think they're better players than we give them credit for. Now, the weakness in this team is obvious, and that's scoring goals. Sheffield were one of the 6 teams in the league that scored below 40 last year, and I don't think Burke's signing will change that as much as I like him. Now, I do actually really like all the strikers on this team, but none of them are really top 6 quality. And that could be the case for the rest of the 11, but the system does at least cover up for them. Goals are really the biggest reason why I can't put Sheffield United into Europe, but I do still think they have an outside chance, because what if Burke does hit the ground running, or McBurney or Mousset play great? Sheffield are a great defensive team, and if their attack gets going, it could happen, but I really don't see that, so that's why I have them finishing 10th. In 11th place, I've got Burnley. Now's where we really stop looking at possibilities of teams to reach Europe and start looking at if they can avoid relegation. With Burnley, that chance is very low, but there are a little bit of concerns. Their attack hasn't exactly been clinical lately. I mean, only 43 goals in the past season isn't great. Chris Wood just had his 3rd straight year with double digits, and Jay Rodriguez has looked really good, but their tally may not go up, and the rest of the team has really struggled to find goals. In addition, they haven't made any signings this year, and I think they're one of the few teams that have regressed, actually. If Burnley get off to a slow start, it could be hard for them to turn the season around. But despite all that, I really don't think they'll end up in a relegation battle, but they don't have the quality to challenge for Europe. For the positive of Burnley, Sean Dykes is a great manager. They've got a really good setup defensively. Nick Pope is one of the top stop shoppers in the league. Tarkowski and me have been solid for a really long time. Taylor, Peters, Bardsley, whoever else is playing in defense have been really good. Their midfield's well organized, with Cork and Westwood being very hardworking. Losing Hendricks may hurt, but I think they'll be able to do fine without him. even in attack, I think they're actually solid with Joy McNeil turning into a really great player. Chris Wood and Jay Rodriguez are solid up front. I think that Burnley will continue to do what they've been doing, frustrating some opponents and staying in the Premier League, but I don't think they'll do anything else this year. Though they are the best. 12th, I've got Southampton. Southampton are a team that's really finding its identity, and I think they've got potential to become a really strong team. However, right now there are some problems. But let's start with the positive of this team. Namely, their manager, Ralph Hasenhüttl. He's been great. He's got the backing of the board as shown, as he stayed after that 9-0 defense, and his pressing style has been really good for this team. Then, keeping with the positives, Danny Ings has turned to the player he was supposed to be at Liverpool, and is his top Premier League striker right now. Then James Ward-Prowse has been another player that's been a huge positive for Southampton, and I really like Redmond in this team. However, that's really where the positives end, and as I look at the rest of the team, it's not terrible, but when you compare them to Bournemouth or Watford last year, I'm not sure if they're much better. Their defense was 15th in goals conceded last year, which is obviously brought down by that 9-0 loss, but it's still pretty bad. Maybe Selisu can come in and form a really good partnership with Ben Derek, who has been solid, but I don't think it'll make their defense, say, top 10. Now, the fullbacks are alright with Kyle Walker-Peters and Ryan Bertrand, but I don't think it's the strength that it used to be when they had Bertrand, when he was at his peak, and Klein. Now, their midfield does have a huge void to fill after losing Højbjerg, and I don't think anybody's been brought in to fix it. And Ward-Prowse's partner looks to be Romeu right now, and he really doesn't add much going forward, or it's not really an impact defensively. Now, Armstrong has been good last year, but he's not a real difference maker, and Shane Long and Adams aren't great partners for Ings either. I think those deficiencies will really limit Southampton, but with their manager and all their star power, I think they'll be able to avoid relegation easily, and I think they'll be able to improve a lot in the. And 13th, I've got Brighton. Now, I should say that I'm a Crystal Palace fan, so I might be overcompensating for my bias, but I think Brighton have had a really strong summer, and they can turn it into a season where they're not in a relegation battle. Brighton made 2.5 really good signings this summer, with Adam Lallana and Veltman coming in, and Ben White returning from his Leeds loan. And the latter two signings could push their defense to a top 10 unit. Ryan is solid in net, Lewis Dunk was wanted by Chelsea, Dan Burns was surprisingly solid at left back, and adding them to Veltman and White, and they've got a pretty good defense. Now, their new signing, Adam Lallana, fills in the void for Moy, who left, and the rest of the midfield, Pascal Gross has been very strong for Brighton. Trossard just got his first Belgium cap. Proper's been looking strong. Now there is a pretty big hole as Dale Stephens isn't the best defensive midfielder, but I still think they are a very good team. And there also is good depth for Brighton with the Iranian whose name I'm about to butcher, Jahan Bakush. Then there's Solly March, Basuma, and the very promising McAllister in the team. And up front, Neil Mapai could add on to his 10 goals and maybe break into around 15. And Adam Connolly could take a step forward and fill in Glenn Murray's void. Overall, I think this Brighton team's a very solid squad. It obviously isn't as good as a team like Leicester or Everton, but for a team avoiding relegation, there isn't really a weak spot. And due to this, I don't think they'll have to worry about relegation this year. In 14th, I've got Leeds. There's a lot of optimism for this team coming into the Premier League, and it's kind of easy to see why. First, their past success was obviously amazing, and they've got an amazing manager, Marcelo Bielsa, to boot. And then they went in and had one of the best summers that any Premier League team has had, bringing in Rodrigo and Koch, who are huge players. But there are some flaws in this team that do need to be addressed. I think the first problem in the squad that could really end up hurting them is goals. Now, Patrick Bamford is a good championship striker, but I would honestly be shocked if he managed to hit 5 goals this year. And Rodrigo managed only 4 with Valencia last year, and out wide, Harrison and Costa haven't proven themselves in the Premier League either, and I really don't see Leeds having a double-digit goal scorer this year. Another weakness could be in the midfield. I mean, their midfield three of Phillips, Hernandez, and Klitsch is what it looks to be. They don't do too much defensively, and they aren't good enough to dominate possession against most teams in the Premier League. Now, their defense is solid, with Koch being a huge addition, but Cooper, Dallas, Aying, and Alowski, they are only better than the teams who are competing for relegation. And on paper, this Leeds team really looks to be in a relegation fight. However, you take a step back and you look at how they actually perform. Their defense that I just called suspect, they let in less goals than Sheffield did in the championship last year. And their midfield has been very good in the past, and I trust Bielsa to put them in a position to do well. And Rodrigo is a great player who has an easy chance to find his form again and come with goals. Leeds is really weird because you can analyze them one way and they can be an easy choice for relegation, but analyze them another way and you can see how a lot of people have them finishing top 10. Now, I do think Leeds will stay up this year, and I don't think they'll even be in a relegation battle at the end of the year, but this team's not really as good as people are saying. I think that 14th is a reasonable place to position them for a team that's got a lot of positives and negatives going for it. In 15th, I've got West Ham. Now, I've heard from a lot of West Ham fans that there's a lot of doubt going into the season, but from an outside perspective, I can see a lot of positives. But first for the bad side. Now, there have been no new players brought in, and there seems to be some unrest in the locker room after the sale of Grady Diangana. In addition, striker's a pretty big concern, with Hilaire not living up to his price tag, and Antonio only seeming to be good when you don't expect him to be. Also, their defense really isn't that great. They allowed the second most goals out of the teams that have stayed up. But despite those concerns, I really don't expect West Ham to go down. The main reason is their great midfield two of Declan Rice and Thomas Souček. They're two of the top defensive mids in the league. They've got a great passing ability, defensive presence, great in the air. They've popped up some goals at the end of the year, too. And the rest of their midfield is pretty good as well. Fornals has been really good. Bowen has been really good since coming in. And Mark Noble, kind of like Henderson, isn't a weak link in there. And between Snodgrass, Wilshere, Lanzini, and Yarmolenko, there's a lot of creativity. Even up front, they're good. I mean, Antonio ended the year on fire, and Hilaire could easily adjust to the Premier League and be good this year. Defense is a bit of a concern, but Ogbonna, Diop, Cresswell, Fredericks, Balbuena, we all know their quality. And Ben Johnson has shown that he can be good, and with a full preseason under David Moyes, I think this team could be decent defensively. Plus, Fabianski is a good goalkeeper behind them. West Ham's kind of weird in that they're almost the opposite of what Leeds are. They've got a great team on paper, but when you take a step back, they don't look too good. But I really see them having a lot of quality to stay up, and the only downside is if their stars get poached away from them, I can see some real trouble in the future for West Ham. But for this, in 16th, I've got Crystal Palace. Now, this is my team, so if I see biased or a little too in-depth, that's why for this. But Palace are coming off one of their best summers in years. Nathan Ferguson and Eze really helped the aging squad get some youth back into it, and Michy Batshuayi solves the striker issue. In addition, Zaha stayed, so it's already a good summer, and he's looked really good in preseason as well. Now, Roy Hodgson is still there, so the defense is going to be organized well, and with all that going for them, I still got Crystal Palace in 16th. Well, the main reason is the tactics. I won't call this a Roy Hodgson problem, because the club's goal has been survival, and he's been accomplishing that. But it's the reason why Crystal Palace haven't been able to break into the top half of the league. Now, looking at the team, Guaid is a solid keeper, but the defense in front of him isn't really great. The center backs could be Cahill, Kouyaté, Tompkins, and Dan, and they have their moments, but they're not world beaters. At fullback, it looks like Mitchell will actually start the season, but as much as I love youth team players breaking in, he doesn't attack as well as Patrick Van Aanholt, and with Ward on the other side, it's another place where creativity isn't there. In the midfield, it seems likely that Crystal Palace will stick with at least two defensive midfielders, maybe three. And if they field Milivojevic, MacArthur, Kouyaté, and McCarthy, they're all pretty bad in attack outside of Luka Milivojevic's set pieces. So unless we play two with Radovan getting a start in midfield, I don't see Crystal Palace's goal scoring going up by much. Then there's a question of if they will play with a 10 this year, because Meyer and Eze are some great talents, but they might not even see the field. And that lack of creativity could lead to Zaha once again being the only creative outlet for this team, him getting fouled to bits, and the attack struggling. This is what I really see happening, and Crystal Palace is going to get into a relegation fight because of that. But because of their attack with Zaha, Ayew, and now Batshuayi, I think goals will come, and their defense is going to be organized enough for us to avoid relegation. Now, for an optimist point of view, Mitchell could turn out to be as good as Wan-Bissaka. Maybe Radovan, Meyer, and Eze will get a lot of playing time. The team will end up great, and they could end up as good as 11th, I'd say. But I really think 16th is a more realistic point of view. Now, there's a lot of talent in this team that'll keep them up, but their desire to stay in the Premier League actually limits how good they can be in it. In 17th, and the last team that I have staying up this year, I have Aston Villa, and it honestly may be as close as it was last year. So when looking at this team, I think we should ask why Villa was nearly relegated last year. And the reason was second worst defense in the league and only getting 6 goals from their forward all season. Have these problems been addressed? Defense, no. Cash was brought in to compete with one of their better defenders, and I really don't think it's improved. But the attack has been improved with Ollie Watkins coming in. And I wouldn't expect 20 plus goals like he got in the championship, but 10 to 15 could be realistic for him, and that will really help Villa. And also, his hold-up play is very good, and that could get Grealish, El Ghazi, Trezeguet a lot more involved. Also, Tom Heaton will return for this team, not that Pepe Reina did a bad job. So, looking at Villa's defense, Tyrone Mings is a standout as a good player, but Konsa looks like he'll be his partner, and he's not that great unless he could take a step forward. And while Target and Guiber aren't exactly liabilities, I think every Premier League team has a winger who could beat them. And their midfield is weird, as McGinn, Luiz, Hourihane, Grealish, they're all really good, and I think they're the reason why Villa were able to stay up. However, their defensive cover in that position is kind of lacking, except for Marvelous Nkamba, who isn't a Premier League level outside of his defensive abilities. I think this will mean Villa and Grealish will need to score goals to stay up, but I really think they can. Grealish and Watkins, they can score and provide a lot. Trezeguet, El Ghazi, and the midfield, especially McGinn, should be able to come up with 5-star goals each. I think the biggest problem outside their defense, though, is their manager, Dean Smith. He's really not a Premier League level manager, and I honestly think that Aston Villa could actually benefit from a slow start and having Dean Smith get fired with a short-term punishment, long-term gain type of thing. I think this is a really flawed team in Aston Villa, but they've got enough quality to stay up. In 18th, and one of the teams I have going down, as you probably noticed, I hadn't mentioned Newcastle yet. Now, Newcastle had made some good signings this summer, they've got some quality players, and Steve Bruce is there to keep them up. So why did they have them getting relegated? Well, first let's look at the signings that they made this summer. Callum Wilson, he's a good striker that a lot of people really like, but when you look at his goal-scoring record more closely, he only hit double digits once in the Premier League, and that was in Eddie Howe's attacking Bournemouth. I really don't think he'll do much in Steve Bruce's system. Ryan Fraser's in the same boat, and we saw St. Maximin not able to play at his best. I don't think he'll do that well as well. Now, Jamal Lewis, he just got relegated and was having trouble keeping Sam Byram off the pitch, so I don't think he can be relied upon to fix this defense. And also, in a team where the culture isn't that great, I mean, everybody knows the problem with Mike Ashley, bringing in 3 players who just got relegated might not be the best idea. I don't think they'll solve the attack, who couldn't score 40 goals, or the defense that allowed 60. Now, on the positive for Newcastle, they have some pretty good creative players. Almiron, St. Maximin, and John Shelby are all pretty good players, and the Longstaff brothers have shown some promise. Plus, DeBrucas is a really good keeper, and Lascelles and Fernandez have been decent. There are some issues, though. Fullback is pretty bad, as I don't see them being really that good defensively. I said my issues with Jamal Lewis, and Manquillo really isn't that strong defensively, and neither is DeAndre Yedlin or Matt Ritchie. Then, when you go to the midfield, Hayden and Shelby, they aren't that bad, but I don't think they're a plus. St. Maximin and Almiron are pretty good going forward, but again, they're kind of stifled by the system, and like I said, I think Callum Wilson may struggle more than you think up front, and Dwight Gale, Joelton, and Andy Carroll probably won't pick up the slack for goals. And when you look at this team's positives, it's kind of weird because it's like, oh, they got some really creative players, but there's a system where players are meant to defend. Like, when you look at how Crystal Palace set up, at least when they play defensively, they field 3 defensive midfielders. Newcastle seem to want to play defensively, but play Almiron and St. Maximin and John Joe Shelby, and they're kind of in like a limbo where they have good offensive talent, but a system that's defensively not that good, and that limbo is really why I see them going down. And honestly, talent-wise, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and West Ham are kind of better than them. And I think if they understood that and really committed to defensively, they could stay up, but right now it seems like Steve Bruce will just go down again, and because of that, that's why I have Newcastle being relegated. Now in 19th and yo-yoing, I have Fulham. It's always tough going into the Premier League, as Fulham have seen, and you really need to make some good signings or have a great team to stay up, and Fulham has neither of these. The signings they made are kind of uninspiring, which is understandable after spending so much in 2018 and still getting relegated, but I think it's a bit of an overcorrection. I mean, Robinson, Teat, and Lamina and Areola, just adding them to the 4th best team in the championship, I don't think that can help them stay up. You had nobody to an attack that was 6th best in the championship. And looking at the defense, I mean, Robinson's good, but and I like him as an American, but will he displace Brian? I'm not sure. I mean, I actually like the signing of Tate, though, and Lamina is talented, but will Fulham be able to get the most out of him? I'm not too sure. The rest of the team is pretty weak. As I said, Ariel is a pretty decent keeper, but it can't hide a weak defense. Ream, Hector, and Adoya are the center back options, and that's going to be destroyed. Fullback, as I mentioned, it's good, but not anything special, and Tate is going to have to adjust to the Premier League. In midfield, I do like Lamina defensively, but will Parker be able to get the best out of him? I'm not sure. Also like Harrison Reed defensively, but it's not a great midfield, and Kearney, Johansson, Onoma, Bobby Reed, it's not the greatest midfield, and then when you look at the attack, is that enough to keep them up? I don't think so. I mean, Mitrovic is a Premier League goal scorer, I believe. He's hit double digits in the past, but that's not going to be enough to keep them up, especially with Knockhart and Calviero not prospering in the Premier League before. When you look at this team, it's an inexperienced manager, a weak defense, a pretty poor midfield, and an average attack, and I think their signings will help them get to 19th. That's a consolation, but I really don't see this full. Last and probably least, in 20th, we've got West Brom. West Brom are by far the most likely team to go down. Before even going into their squad, they finished winless in their last 4 games of the championship and only came up due to Brentford slipping up. Then that team only signed 1 player, and I don't even know if Cypri will start for them. And they've actually lost some decent players, and Ferguson, Burke, Brunton, Gareth Barry retired, and the last time we saw a team that got promoted and looked worse than they did the year before was Hull, who went down straight away. Going through the actual team, I mean, Johnston, he's a good keeper, but when you compare it to the rest of the league, he's probably bottom 3. In defense, I do like Ajayi. O'Shea's a decent prospect, but Bartley, Cypre, Furlong, Kieran Gibbs, good to see him again, and Townsend don't exactly fill me with confidence, but in fairness, neither did Sheffield United's. But I don't think Slaven Bilic is Chris Wilder as a manager. The midfield of the pretty good Mateus Pereira, but Livermore Sawyers, Phillips has shown some glimpses, and Krananovic, it isn't awe-inspiring. Out wide, I do like Callum Robinson and Grady Diangana, but they're not going to keep you up, especially when Pal Robinson-Kanu and Charlie Austin are up top, and I don't think you can expect 8 goals from them total. This is a West Brom team that probably shouldn't have come up and haven't capitalized on the great opportunity. And I think they'll go straight back to the championship. So that's my predictions for the Premier League this year. Let me know if you disagree with them. If you like this, like, subscribe. Hey, stick around. I'll be doing some more soccer content. Or football if you're European. Hey, it was fun. This is Marco. I'll see you.